threw a leg across that iron horse and pulled the throttle down. A million things rushing through his mind like that rumbling sound. Living life in his own eyes, direction isn't clear. So searching all these years.
Welcome to Answers from Mars Hill. This is Pastor Ski. I'm the New York State Elder of Bikers of Christ Motorcycle Ministry and the Senior Pastor of the Rushing Wind Biker Church in Holbrook, New York. And today I want to start a conversation over the next 2 weeks on the Bible. This book here that people who are Christians hold it as a sacred book sent to us from God. The reason I want to do this particular topic is many of my friends, many people out there, they look at the book as kind of a fantasy book and written by some ignorant people, and there's a lot of things in there that aren't historically accurate and a lot of made up things, and so I'm hoping to help clarify so that when people kind of think of this faith that we're in, the Christian faith, they can understand that we see a lot of credibility and a lot of tangible evidence in why this book, we believe, has been sent to us as the Word of God. There's many faith books with different religions that Muslims and Wiccan and Hindus, Buddhists all hold dear. Of course, Christianity with the Bible. But today I want to discuss the Bible. Hopefully you'll get a little better understanding of why we think it's relevant for today. And really the questions that we need to ask, is this a book that's a speculation about God, or is it a revelation from God? Also, is it man's opinion of God or God's disclosure to us about himself? And thirdly, is it a word about God by human beings, or is it a word from God to human beings? And so hopefully you can get some information over the next week or two to form your own opinion, but at least have some more information, some things that are historically relevant, and maybe you'll kind of think that maybe there is some credibility of this book we call the Bible to be something valuable for the human experience. The thing about the Bible is it's the most translated, the most read, the most loved, the most hated book in the history of the world. It's also the best-selling book in the history of the world. There's a certain unique feature, or many unique features in the Bible. It's really a compilation of smaller books all coming together in harmony throughout history to tell one story. And that story has one central figure, and that's this man that would be God called Jesus. There's 66 books within the Bible, written by 40 authors over approximately 1,500 years. The Old Testament was written mostly in Hebrew, the New Testament mostly in Greek and also Aramaic. Topics and styles that are in the Bible are history, poetry, biography. There's songs, there's geography, prophecy, letters, stories, parables, and also science. The writers of the Bible include a shepherd, a prophet, a tax collector, fisherman, a doctor, a tent maker, king, peasants, philosophers, scholars. There are poor people who have written books of the Bible. There are rich people. There are blue-collar people. There are white-collar people. And, of course, there's people that wear a clergy collar. The Bible, particularly the New Testament, was written by eyewitnesses or people who interviewed the eyewitnesses, many of which were martyred, and they never changed their story. One of the compelling questions about this Christian faith and also the validity of the Bible is who would die for something that's untrue. One of the more compelling proofs, if you will, or thoughts to consider when you consider the Bible as something from God, Christianity as a true faith or a true movement of God. As Christians, we believe the Bible is the primary way that God speaks to man. This is actually one of the most brutally honest books in existence. It shows the dark sides, the bad sides of its heroes, not just all the good, and it doesn't lift them up without exposing their humanity. We lovingly call this book our instruction manual, the manual for humanity here on earth. What do we do now? How do we function? What's the ultimate life? What is the life? What is life lived out to the best? How do we have the best, most productive, most fulfilling, and purposeful life? How do we get the most out of this life? How do we live long? How do we have health? How do we maintain and not damage ourselves and community and the human experience here? And so when you think about it, when something is made or manufactured or created, it often comes with what we call an instruction manual. And in that instruction manual, it tells us things about how this item works the best, what to use it for, what its purpose is, what to put into it, what not to put into it, troubleshooting, there's help section, there's questions, how to operate it more efficiently, also how to keep it clean, how to maintain it. And so when we look at this book that us believers in Jesus look at as the very Word of God, we use it as an instruction manual for living out the best human condition. Over history, almost every inspirational, encouraging phrase, encouraging statement or analogy, nice quotes that tend to help us understand life and its challenges, all of them have its root message within the Bible somewhere. This is God-breathed wisdom and instruction for the human condition. Unfortunately, what the majority of my friends, my family, acquaintances think or believe about the Bible, and probably most of you out there, is what you've been told or what you've been taught. And just as last week or the last couple of weeks, I've been talking about personal discovery, of how we tend to take what people tell us at face value and we don't do our own due diligence. And just like the conversation on whether God exists or not, what this book actually is that has changed the face of humanity for thousands of years, not many people have done their homework, that they haven't done their own discovery. They listen to their family, they might listen to higher education. Now we're in a day and age of a History Channel and all kinds of people that put their own spin, their own take, their own thoughts on things that come from the Bible, information, or even faith itself. And so in this conversation, I'm going to be talking about archaeological, historical information, biological, cultural, many geographical proofs that the Bible is possibly the most accurate historic document in existence. There actually has never been any evidence disputing anything in the Bible. I'm sure some of you may have heard that for the first time. They've never come up with any kind of irrefutable evidence that something in there is wrong. No smoking gun, so to speak. And they've been really looking for something since the days Jesus walked the earth. And so there's been so much expert scrutiny of the Bible, its historical content and accuracy, and yet they've found virtually nothing that they can contradict. It's a very historical document. It has many verified original copies. The Bible actually is in a category or itself, is a category all in itself as far as credibility. If we take three of the ancient manuscripts and just compare them to the new scriptures of the Bible, Homer's Iliad, for instance, was written approximately 800 BC. And the earliest found copy of it was found 400 BC. And so there was a 400-year gap between when it was written and when it was found. And manuscripts and pieces of manuscripts total 1,757. So that's the information on Homer's Iliad. Plato's Tetralogies was written about 400 BC. The earliest found copy was 895 AD, which is roughly 1,300 years. And so there are hundreds of years between when it was written and when it was found. And there are only 210 copies or partial copies of manuscripts in existence. Caesar's Gallic Wars was written between 144 BC. The earliest found copies were somewhere in the 9th century AD. And so we're looking at 950-year difference between when it was written and when the first copies were found. And there's only been roughly 250 copies or pieces of manuscripts that have been found. The scriptures of the New Testament, on the other hand, were written between 50 and 100 AD. The earliest found manuscripts were found in 130 AD, so there's only a 40-year gap from when it was written to the earliest found manuscripts. And to date, there are 5,795 manuscripts or partial manuscripts of the New Testament found, by far more original copies than all the other ancient historical documents combined. And so as we take our first break, after we come back, I just want to speak a little bit more about the authenticity of the Bible and the accuracy and what was found, and we'll look a little bit into the Old Testament scriptures and one of the greatest finds in history, the Dead Sea Scrolls, which legitimized the early writings and the accuracy of the Bibles we have today compared to the Bibles in the original writing of the Old and New Testament. So after a word from our sponsors, we'll come back and we'll continue this discussion on the authenticity and the credibility of this book called the Bible.
Hey everybody, this is Motorcycle Mike, the personal injury lawyer. I've been riding motorcycles my entire adult life. During the course of my 30-year career as a lawyer, I've also represented countless injured motorcyclists. If you're one of them, I can be of assistance to you. Go to my website, please, motorcyclemikeesq.com. I'll always be there for you. I'm on your side when you ride.
Hi, my name is Sharon Gillette, and I'm the owner of One Stitch at a Time. I've been doing this since I'm 9 years old, but it became full-time when my husband was diagnosed with cancer several years ago. And I never went back to work because I wanted to take care of him. I feel what makes me stand out is that I care. I take a personal interest in your project. I take the time to find your correct fit and treat you like a friend, not just a customer. So whether it's embroidery, making patches, printing shirts, doing alterations and repairs, or bringing your ideas to life, you can call me at 631-428-1245 or visit my website at www.onestitchatatime.co.
Welcome back to Answers from Mars Hill. This is Pastor Ski, and I want to continue the discussion on the credibility of the Bible. Before our break, I mentioned about how many more manuscripts have been found, and how they were found much closer to the time they were written than any other ancient text in antiquities. And the Bible itself, over time, has probably been the book that has been most plagiarized, most twisted, even within the Christendom, as I like to call it. that different denominations, different veins of the Christian church has shifted and changed things and looked at things a little bit differently. So this book has been attacked really since the beginning. Even within the Bible itself, there are stories of the first churches and how Paul would warn them that people were changing what was the original writings, the original beliefs that Jesus downloaded into humanity and what the original apostles taught. And so this book has been really the most attacked book in history, and not just within the Christian realm. Really, there's several stories within the Quran that originated in the Bible and have been shifted somewhat within their sacred text. The Jehovah's Witnesses have plagiarized and changed much of the Bible. The Mormons also have plagiarized and changed much of the Bible. And on top of that, something that I really am very adamant about, and people hear me that in my church talk about it all the time, is this dependency on Bible commentaries. Because everybody thinks that they have the take on what the Bible says and how we should view it. And so there's thousands and thousands and thousands of volumes of how we're supposed to translate, how we're supposed to look at the Bible, and there's so many different beliefs, misconceptions, warped theology that's come out of this. And it's just like right now, if we look in our higher education and we look in society, there's a move now to change history. To change actually what happened in the past, because it doesn't go well with what they would like to think and how they want to move on with their future. And people's agendas have started to take hold where they want to erase history and rewrite it to be something that it wasn't, because it falls in line with what they would like to believe. And so this has all been going for a long time. Something else I want to cover, the second point, is the historical accounts in the Bible. As I mentioned, there's really been no ancient text that enjoys such a wealth of good text affirmation. There's a move hundreds of years ago to discredit the Bible historically, discredit its cultural content. But as archaeology has advanced and more findings, more and more information stated in the Bible has actually been authenticated by archaeological finds. It seems the more they dig, the more they find the Bible possibly is the best information source of ancient history. Archaeologist E.M. Blakelock said it's important to note that Near Eastern archaeology has demonstrated the historical and geographical reliability of the Bible in many areas. Nelson Gluck, who appeared on the cover of Time magazine, who's considered one of the greatest archaeologists ever, wrote, "No archaeology study has ever controverted or overturned a Bible reference. Scores of archaeological findings have been made to confirm in clear outline or in exact detail historical statements that are made in the Bible. And by the same token, proper evaluation of biblical descriptions has often led to amazing discoveries." And what he's saying is the Bible has often been used as a roadmap to locate archaeological finds. Dr. Clifford Wilson, former director of the Australian Institute of Archaeology, said it's remarkable that where confirmation is possible and has come to light, the Bible withstands investigation in ways that are unique to all literature. Its superiority to attack, its capacity to withstand criticism, its amazing facility to be proven right after all, are all staggering by any standards of scholarship. Seeming assured results disproving the Bible have a habit of backfiring. Over and over again, the Bible is vindicated. And so many of you really aren't aware out there that archaeology has really proven the accuracy of the Bible over history. And as more time goes on, more and more things are found that proves the historic accuracy of the Bible. Just recently, one of the things that people were looking at, this man Pontius Pilate, his existence, because there wasn't much evidence or any evidence of him and his position in Judea for a long time. But recently a find in Caesarea uncovered a stone that actually had the inscription of Pontius Pilate. Also, first century crucifixion has been confirmed by many archaeological finds. The ancient ruins of Babylon have been found. The pool of Siloam, where Jesus healed a blind man, and Jacob's well. Also, the ruins of the fallen wall in Jericho have been found. So many other finds that confirm biblical history confirm that the historicity of the Bible is actually very consistent and in harmony of what the world knows true history to be. Another factor within the Bible is there's an internal consistency or harmony within the Bible. Some people think there are contradictions, that there are shifts, and there are things that don't make sense altogether. But the fact of the matter is, from Genesis to Revelation, the Bible is absolutely consistent in everything that it teaches. And the amazing thing, the miraculous thing, if you will, is it is consistent despite the fact that there are 40 different authors that wrote books within the Bible. And how each author has described God, there's amazing consistency. Throughout the Bible, it deals with life's most controversial questions. From beginning to the end, it answers questions like, how did the universe come into existence? Does God exist, which we spent 2 weeks investigating? And if God exists, what is he like? Why does man exist? What is the purpose for us being here? Why is there evil and suffering in the world? These are questions that many people tend to disagree about, yet the Bible attacks it head on, one verse at a time, with incredible consistency. This book, called the Bible, had a lot of expert scrutiny in the early writings in the early church. The early church had extremely high standards of what books were judged to be authentic before they could be included in the Bible. They had to be written by an apostle or someone who was in their immediate circle, had to be in line with Christian faith, and had to be in widespread use among the churches. And so the consistency, despite 66 different documents, 40 authors, different backgrounds, different cultures, different languages, is miraculously consistent despite many authors who never knew each other. There are also many writings outside of the Bible that confirm much of the history and the writings of the Bible, in the records of the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and the Romans. In their ancient writings, it verifies the historical accuracy of the Bible, records of people, places, events. More than 50 people mentioned in the Old Testament were verified, and 30 or more people written about in the New Testament have been verified as actual historical people. And considering the time frame and just how hard it is to find archaeological evidence from that time period, it really is a testament to the accuracy of the Bible. Also, the biblical wars that are mentioned in the Bible are historically verified. The kings, as well as other details, Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel, stories, interactions, are all verified outside of the Bible. There are actually thousands of Babylonian clay tablets with corroborating evidence of what is in the scriptures of the Bible. Jewish historian Flavius Josephus talks about Herod, Herod's adulterous wife, the murder of John the Baptist, confirming also that Jesus walked on the earth as a historical character. Josephus actually mentions several others that are mentioned in the Bible and were part of the first church. In Flavius Josephus's Antiquities of the Jews, he wrote about Jesus. At this time there was a wise man who was called Jesus, and his conduct was good, and he was known to be virtuous, and many people from among the Jews and other nations became disciples. Pilate commanded him to be crucified, and those who had become his disciples did not abandon his discipleship. They reported that he had appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion and that he was alive. And that's from Josephus's Antiquities of the Jews. And those words were not written from the Bible. but a Jewish historian of high esteem who, being a Jew, had every reason to not want the authenticity of Jesus to be true. And so on top of that, there are over 30 more sources outside of the Bible written within 150 years of Jesus' life that attest to over 100 facts about his life. You can see if you look the historical Jesus up, you can find these facts. And other other secular historians of the time that attested to much of the facts of Jesus' life was Cornelius Tacitus, who was a Roman historian from 55 to 120 AD, Gaius Hibernius, secretary of Emperor Hadrian in the years 117 to 138, and the Jewish Talmud all has corroborating evidence of the history of the Bible, the characters of the Bible, the people that walked the earth during those times. So it isn't just the Bible itself that talks about all these historical events and people. There's plenty of secular history written by secular historians that corroborate everything that's in the Bible. So when we come back, we're going to continue and we're going to talk about some of the details in the Bible that have been corroborated by history.
Hey everybody, this is Motorcycle Mike, the personal injury lawyer. In addition to representing injured motorcyclists for over 30 years now, during that same time, I've represented countless car crash victims and construction workers injured on construction sites. If you need my assistance, go to my website, motorcyclemikeesq.com. I will always be there for you.
Welcome back to Mars Hill. This is Pastor Ski again from the Russian Wind Biker Church. And I just want to continue and finish up that thought of historical sources outside of the Bible. I mentioned there are several historical sources and historians of antiquities that have verified many of the stories, many of the characters that are talked about in the Bible. But also some things that historical sources outside the Bible corroborate are the flood, the long lifespans prior to the flood, details about the Jews' exodus, the Syrian invasion of Israel, Nebuchadnezzar's invasion of Judah, Cyrus freeing the Jews from Babylon, long time of darkness at the time of Jesus' death, and there are many, many other things that are corroborated outside of the Bible by historical sources that aren't of faith. And so what I want to do now is I want to shift a little bit to the Bible's scientific accuracy and foresight. Many people have really uninformed information that the Bible has bad science in it. And the thing is, when you read the Bible, you need to understand the writers were describing things as they appear to the eye. They didn't have all the depths of knowledge of the science we have now, so when they describe something is actually what you could see with your eyes and what you could actually observe. And so the only really unproven theories which where science and the Bible disagree are really evolution and naturalism. And so in anything that's verified, testable facts, the Bible is in complete harmony with science. We will up the road talk about evolution versus creation, and we'll talk about naturalism. But right now, I just want to continue along the conversation of the credibility of what's in the Bible and the Christian faith that believes this is something that is authentic and good for the human condition and living a good life. Just that people out there know that we have reason to believe that this is something valuable to our lives. And so, as I said, there are so many verified, testable facts in the Bible that are in complete harmony with science. Even though they had no microscopes, no telescopes, no satellites, no other technology that they could really look in depth like we could nowadays. Every other ancient religious writing has very unscientific views of some things. The Hindu Vedas teaches the earth is flat and triangular. The Quran says the sun sets in a muddy spring. And when we look at the Bible, we see that it stays free of all these errors and actually at times reveals amazing truths about the world and the universe centuries before science actually discovered that they were actually true. In Psalm 19, verse 6, we hear David talking about the sun being on a circuit through space. And talking about the sun, King David says its rising is from one end of the heaven and its circuit to the other end. For years, science didn't know what that meant until it first found out about the movement of the sun. And so just by observation, David, and through a revelation of God as he was looking through it, saw something that science didn't verify for centuries. The shape of the earth itself. Long before the earth was discovered to be round, I think we've all heard that they believed the earth was flat. The Greeks, the Babylonians, the Chinese, they all believed the earth to be flat. But the Bible at that time went against popular scientific thought. Job actually alludes to a circular earth in chapter 6 of the book of Job. Isaiah wrote some 700 years before Jesus that it is he who sits above the circle of the earth. And so long before science proved that the earth was round and popular thought was the earth was flat, the writings of the scripture, what God revealed to man, had the truths before science actually discovered them. There's also information on stars, on gravity, along with other scientific truths that were mentioned in the Bible long before they were discovered by science. And so you'll find when you actually read the Bible and kind of pay attention to what it's saying, how it describes things, you'll find that it's very scientifically accurate. Right? And I want to move on now to the evidences of the manuscripts. You know, critics of the Bible say the Bible has been copied and translated so many times through the centuries that we can't trust what it says today. There's also some rogue churches and even denominations that say a lot of it can't be taken literally. It's been changed too many times. But actually, the manuscript case is probably one of the very evidences being able to prove the truth of the Bible. The first thing we need to understand is, what is a manuscript? A manuscript is any surviving handwritten copy of an ancient document that predates the invention of the printing press. And so today there survives over 25,000 partial or complete ancient handwritten copies of the New Testament. Many, as well as thousands of copies of the Old Testament, many predating the life of Jesus. In 1947, one of the hugest, that's a word, discoveries in antiquities, a shepherd boy in Qumran in the West Bank was looking for a lost goat and found in a cave large clay pots containing an ancient collection of books of the Old Testament dating as far back as 300 years BC. They were all carefully wrapped in leather manuscripts. And archaeologists spent years searching the area, and by the time they were done, they found copies of every book of the Old Testament with the exception of the book of Esther, and also found multiple copies of each book that was found. For instance, there was 19 copies of Isaiah, 25 copies of Deuteronomy, 30 copies of Psalms. And these all lay untouched and unfound for almost 2,000 years. With this find, along with hundreds of other manuscripts archaeologists have found, after having scores of biblical scholars, translators, textual and linguistic experts, with an extremely high degree of certainty, They have every text of the Bible Jesus quoted and the early Christians used 2,000 years ago. This, along with the writings of the early church leaders, men like Polycarp, Justin Martyr, Eusebius, and Tertullian, the verification of what was in the original writings within all of their writings in the Bible can be more than adequately verified. And so there's enough writings and quotes by the early church fathers that even if no manuscripts had been found, the entire Old Testament and most of the New Testament could have been reproduced. And so we see the authenticity and just the facts of the Bible we have in our hands today compared to what was originally written. We have more documented evidence of manuscripts than really any other text in antiquities. And so the evidence is there, and the authenticity of the original has a high level of confidence. What I want to talk about now is the actual characters and the stories in the Bible itself. One thing about the Bible, it's one of the most honest books ever written. They're very honest about the people in the stories. Now, when you think about putting together a story for people to believe and to follow, it probably wouldn't be the people who are listed in the Bible. You'd want perfect people to look up to. Yet all the people in the Bible had flaws, some of them in pretty major ways. And so the fathers of our faith were by no means perfect men. And, I don't know about you out there, but as far as my faith and the man I follow, Jesus, and this lifestyle and this movement I'm in, it's just very refreshing to know that we're not trying to emulate perfect people, that these are all flawed men and women, just like I am, just like anyone else is, yet they found favor with God, and they could move in a direction of being drawn closer to God and moving towards what He would want in our lives. There's so much transparency and honesty in the stories of the Bible that the men and women who are heroes and heroines, even the people that wrote the Bible, very transparent. And one of the stronger cases that the Bible seems to be a truthful and honest work is the transparency of some of its heroes. Noah, for instance, got drunk and his children found him naked. Abraham lied multiple times about his wife because he was afraid to be killed. David had an adulterous affair and ended up ordering a man murdered. Moses murdered an Egyptian. In anger, he misrepresented God in the wilderness, and it actually cost him entering the promised land that God had called him to lead the Jews to move into. It's got stories of Israel sporadically turning from God to idols and coming back and then falling again. We hear Jesus calling Peter the apostle Satan. We see Peter turning on Jesus, denying he ever knew him. Also, we see the disciples, their pride, wanting to be raised up of prominence and being more important than each other. And then when Jesus is arrested, all of them running away to save their own lives. And then the Apostle Paul, of course, admitting that he was a wretched man, the chief of all sinners. Many more characters in the Bible are described in their fallibility and their humanity. And it doesn't sound like a lot of high character people you would want to use to promote a new religion or a book about that faith or that new movement. And so as we move into our last segment after these few words, I want to talk a little bit about the conviction that Christians had through the years, the willingness to die for something that they believed, and how there must be something compelling to cause people to be willing to give up their lives for something that is talked about in the book. Anyway, after a word from our sponsors, we'll come back with the last segment of this discussion on the credibility and the historicity of the Bible.
Hey everybody, this is Motorcycle Mike, the personal injury lawyer. I've been riding motorcycles my entire adult life. During the course of my 30-year career as a lawyer, I've also represented countless injured motorcyclists. If you are one of them, I can be of assistance to you. Go to my website, please, MotorcycleMikeESQ.com. I'll always be there for you. I'm on your side when you ride.
Hi, my name is Sharon Gillette, and I'm the owner of One Stitch at a Time. I've been doing this since I'm 9 years old, but it became full-time when my husband was diagnosed with cancer several years ago. And I never went back to work because I wanted to take care of him. I feel what makes me stand out is that I care. I take a personal interest in your project. I take the time to find your correct fit and treat you like a friend, not just a customer. So whether it's embroidery, making patches, printing shirts, doing alterations and repairs, or bringing your ideas to life, you can call me at 631-428-1245 or visit my website at www.onestitchatatime.co.
Welcome back to Answers from Mars Hill. This is Pastor Ski one more time. This is the last segment of today's show on the credibility of the Bible, the historicity, why us who follow Jesus Christ look at this as a book that has been sent to us, written by God through human hands. So what I want to talk about, there's several topics in this last segment. The first one is the willingness that people who follow Jesus are to die for their faith. There's always been a willingness to die for the cause of Jesus Christ in a true follower of Jesus. And the Bible speaks about a lot of them, and there's been thousands more since the Bible was written. The New Testament was almost completely written by men who were martyred for their faith. If this book was made up, it's highly unlikely those first disciples would be willing to die for the truth of Jesus in the Bible. If Jesus had not rose from the dead, those people that actually were there with him, I don't think there would be some compelling reason for them to allow themselves to be murdered and tortured for this faith. Even non-Christian scholars like Josephus and historians like Ignatius, Cornelius Tacitus, Clement of Alexandria, Clement of Rome, and Origen have recorded that many of Jesus' early followers, including the apostles, suffered intense persecution and, of course, even death for their ongoing belief and preaching that Jesus was the Lord who was risen from the dead. And so, one of the kind of proofs, and even up to today, if you remember several years ago, there were 21 Christians that were martyred out in the Middle East that were all lined up, and none of them denied their faith as they died at the hands of I don't know if it was ISIS, but the terrorists there. And so it's been one of the kind of compelling arguments about the reality of what this book teaches and the reality of our faith. Another kind of proof of the authenticity of this book, that there's something special, is its fulfillment of prophecy, predictions for the future. The times and places that these books were written, the things that were said in the Bible are real documented historical people writing in a certain time. We know when the books of the Bible were written, and we know it's in the lifespan of their years. And so when people make predictions about the future in general, the failure rate exposes their humanity and how we really can't know the future. Yet over and over again, the authors of the Bible, many times hundreds of years in advance, detail prophecies about people, places, events. Many have already come to pass, and some are in the process of being set up and fulfilled right now. Several things we look at in the Middle East and nations that are aligning, Iran, Russia, and China, These are all areas that were prophesied in the Bible in a particular part of history. We look at historic wars, moves of Israel, future events of Israel, and many more things concerning the world and national events have all come to fruition. But probably the most compelling are the various ones throughout the Old Testament that predict in great detail the life and death of Jesus Christ. There are some 313 prophetic descriptions surrounding this one man who would be the Messiah, such as his family lineage, the town he was born in, Bethlehem, the tribe he would come from, the lineage of David, the precise time in history that he would die, that he would come while the temple was still standing, being born of a virgin, making the blind see, the lame walk, things like he would be rejected by his own people, how he would die, the crucifixion, which was predicted hundreds of years before crucifixion was even a way of executing people, and also how he would rise from the dead. So there's scores more about the life and death of Jesus. All had been written at least about 400 years before he was born and well before that, and so there are many more. If you really sit down and calculate it, the probability of just 8 of those things happening in one person is 1 in 10 to the 17th power, or 1 in 100 quadrillion. And that's just if 8 of these 313 items were fulfilled in one man. And so there's other hundreds of prophecies of nations rising up, falling, as well as other matters that are predicted and came to pass in the Old Testament scriptures. The historical fulfilling of these predictions or prophecies are pretty compelling evidence. There's something very different and special about this book we call the Bible. Some may say, well, the apostles and the writers could have made it all up, knowing the scriptures and plugged in all the details. But then again, they were all willing to die for this fabricated story, along with the 1,000 in the early church, or thousands in the early church that became followers, which is a historic fact, that kept bringing this supposed scam, even though they would obviously know it was made up. The odds of all these people being willing to die and being martyred and continuing these faith 2,000 years into today is pretty compelling evidence that there's something special about this book. Something that I've experienced in my life is the Bible's transforming power for good. The Bible claims to be a living and powerful book. No other book in the world has had the transforming effect on lives, on society, for the good, more than that of the Bible. The Bible wasn't given to us to entertain us. To read is good literature, even though it might be. But the Bible was given to us through willing men to give us the very words of God, to his most precious creation, humanity, so we could be reconciled back to him and be in relationship to him as our Father and us as being his children, not an angry monarch looking to feed his ego. So the Bible was given to reconnect us with God, explaining to us the reason, the purpose for everything, so we could establish the kind of humanity that was his intent when he first created us. Countless people testify the radical transformation that has rocked their lives through the reading, studying, and powering of the words of the Bible. And I count myself among one of those. It just plain changes lives. Everywhere the gospel has been received, from prisons to third world countries, it's transformed millions of lives for the good. Hospitals, health systems were started by the church. Some of the world's greatest learning institutions were founded by Christians. Even Ivy League schools like Yale, Harvard, Princeton were all started by Christians for Christian purposes. Even my own alma mater, University of Southern California, though not actually at this time aspiring to any kind of faith, was founded as a Methodist university with their sports teams known as the USC Methodists. And so people of faith that is explained by the words of the Bible have organized massive humanitarian efforts for the poor, the needy, still today, World Vision, the Southern Baptist Convention, Salvation Army, and many others. So the Bible has inspired people to work for the equity of men and women, those of different skin colors, furthering a development of great music and great art. Handel, Bach, Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, Mendelssohn, Stravinsky, Brahms, Schubert, and on, really claim that their faith and the Bible is one of the main inspirations for their creativity. 12-step programs are all originated from principles that came from the Bible, with the God of the Bible being their original higher power. And so as we wind down the end of this show, I got so much more I want to share, but we'll continue this conversation next week about the scriptures of the Bible, about why Christians such as myself have put such faith and such trust in this book. And my hope through this show and these two shows in particular is so people can understand that we're not following some fabricated, some made-up fairy tale book of theology and just some kind of spirituality. But there's so much that proves that this is actually something that's quite special. The history involved being accurate, the science involved being accurate, the things that it talks about, the betterment of humanity, what it's caused in society, in individuals, the revelation of what this book represents, particularly people who follow Jesus Christ, has changed the world for the better. And as I mentioned in the beginning, that not everyone that calls themselves a Christian is a Christian. And so when you start to look at us, go to the source and find out what a real follower of Jesus would sound like, what he would do, how he'd live his life, and how he'd treat others, and judge us on that. And that's really what is written in the true words of this book. And so as we close, I want to thank our sponsors, Motorcycle Mike Levine, Sharon Gillette, and One Stitch at a Time, Samantha's Little Bit of Heaven in East Northport, and also if anyone out there is interested in stopping by the Biker Church, the Rushing Wind Biker Church, we're at 10 Peachtree Court in Holbrook, New York. Our address is 10 Peachtree Court in Holbrook, New York, and you can donate if you'd like to the Rushing Wind Biker Church or this program. Go to rushingwindbc.org. Check out our website. And also at the end of this program, you'll see a text number if you like to donate and give to worthy causes through technology. We have a text number that you can donate to the cause, either the show or the furthering of our outreach into the motorcycle community and the building of our church out in Holbrook. And so this is Pastor Ski of the Rushing Wind Biker Church in Holbrook, New York, New York elder of Bikers for Christ Motorcycle Ministry, saying goodbye from Answers from Mars Hill. And I'd like to hear your questions. Email me, and we'll cover some of your topics on the show in the future. God bless you, and have a good week. We'll see you next week.